Hello, my name is Jack Wallen. I am here with the New Stack and New Stack makers. I have with me Lucy Wyman, who is a software engineer for Puppet, and Ravi Lachhman, an evangelist for Harness. And today, Lucy is going to demonstrate Bolt. Now, before we get on with the demonstration, probably have a few questions, as do all of us. First question on your mind might be, what is Bolt? Lucy, answer that question for us.
Yeah, so Bolt is a task runner at its heart and an orchestration tool as well. So task running orchestration, so it's meant for running ad hoc commands and scripts across your infrastructure, supports Windows and Linux and OS X, connects over SSH and WinRM, so it is entirely agentless. And then we have a fancy language for orchestrating more complex interactions. So you can use that to like provision something, stand up more infrastructure, and we have a whole language for orchestrating all of that.
Okay, so I assume that Bolt is a software or a service that can be installed on Linux, or is it installable on Linux and Windows and macOS, or is it primarily just Linux?
Yeah, so we support Windows, OS X, Debian, Celeste 12, Fedora, CentOS, all the usual Linuxes.
Okay.
But yeah, it totally works with Windows as well.
Okay. So I remember when we were originally discussing this, Ravi had a really interesting question, and seeing as how you are from Puppet, his question was, how is Bolt different from Puppet?
Yeah, so Puppet is really intended to manage resources over time. So it's really good at checking in every 30 minutes and making sure that nothing has changed or that your infrastructure hasn't drifted at all. Whereas Bolt is really much more about like point in time changes. So instead of using declarative syntax to say, here's how I want my infrastructure to look all the time, you are really just saying like, at this point in time, I need to run this command or deploy this database or migrate this database. And it's much more about just doing something once and not having to care about anything afterwards.
So you can get more granular with Bolt?
I don't know that I would say granular. It's much more of like, I think temporally, like okay, what you want to be doing like now versus what you want to be managing for a long time.
Okay. And so to add on to that question, how is it different from Ansible?
Yeah. So one thing that we're really proud of is that we treat Windows as a first-class citizen. So both Windows and Linux, again, totally supported, both for having Bolt, the controller, on it, and then also for connecting to Windows nodes. Our orchestration language, so Ansible has like playbooks, right? And those are necessarily limited by being written in YAML. And so with Bolt, we have a similar orchestration called plans, is like the kind of analogous concept. And you can write those in YAML, or you can write them in our scripting language, the plan language. And so having that scripting capability gives you some nice things, like you can have if statements, which means you can have better error handling, and be a little bit more programmatic about it. And lastly, tasks, which are kind of our analogous to Ansible modules, can be written in any language. Okay. So PowerShell or Ruby or Python or Bash. Like we're literally just executing whatever you define for us as a task on the remote system. So there's nothing we need to do to add support. If it runs on your system, we can run it.
So for those that are interested, to really get the most out of Bolt, chances are you're going to have to learn the Bolt scripting language.
I think so. It's mostly Puppet. So if you're familiar with Puppet, then you're all set. If not, then you can actually write your plan in YAML, and we have a command that will convert it from YAML to Puppet. And that's actually really nice, because what a lot of people will do is they'll start out writing in YAML, which is just a slightly simpler plan language because it's data serialization. And then once they need to add any complexity, so any conditional branching or anything, then they can convert their plan. And if they never need to convert their plan, then that's totally fine too. Like the YAML and Puppet plan languages are equally supported. We want you to use both of them. Yeah.
So chances are, if you know how to write a YAML playbook in Ansible, you're not going to have a whole lot of trouble writing one in Bolt.
I don't think so.
Plan.
It's pretty straightforward, yeah.
Okay. Ravi, do you have any questions you want to throw at her before we start this demo?
No, that was pretty good. I think kind of encapsulated a lot of the questions I had. So Lucy did a great job. So it's time to see the goods.
Yeah. So Lucy, tell us what you're first going to demo, and then show us the demo.
Yeah. So my demo is actually going to be pretty simple. So I want to be demoing part of this, but then I want to show you how our actual Forge team is using Bolt to migrate their RDS database with no downtime. And I asked them, and they said that I could not actually migrate the database.
Of course.
But I can at least use it to show you kind of a more real-world use case. So I'll kind of use toy demos to demonstrate the concepts, and then we can kind of walk through how the Forge actually migrates their database.
Okay.
So let me share my screen. Is that big enough?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So I've got a couple of files here, and they're pretty, normal. So there's this bolt.yaml, which is my config. Pretty straightforward. Since I'm connecting over SSH, I'm going to be using a couple of config options. And then one thing that's kind of interesting is in this inventory file, we have plugins for our inventory, and we have a couple that are just built into Bolt. So there's one for AWS, there's one for Azure, and there's one for Terraform. There's a couple of others. And then you can also write your own now, which is very nice. So I'm going to be using the Terraform plugin that I have set up. So I'm getting my plugins from my Terraform, which I used to spin up just a couple of AWS instances. And then a little bit of the syntax here. So these two dir and resource type are parameters to the plugin. And then I can set my URI to be an attribute from Terraform of AWS. So I set my URI to be the public IP and then the host name.
Is that URI the public IP of the EC2 instance you're starting up, or?
Yep.
Okay. Also, one quick question. So going back to your NewStack folder, if I've just installed Bolt today, I'm totally new to Bolt, right? So for a bare minimum project setup, I would need maybe that Bolt YAML, maybe some sort of inventory YAML. Are those kind of bare necessities I need to say, this is minute zero of my Bolt experience?
I think so. I mean, even in inventory, I would say is not minute zero necessary, because you can do Bolt command run hostname and then just give it the actual thing you want to run it on. So you could even just list out all of your nodes without
you are right. This is very point in time. So yeah, this is solid explanation between Puppet and Bolt. So
right, yeah. It's I guess if you're a Puppet expert, it's an exec resource, but now it's a command line tool. So even that I would say is not necessarily necessary, and even the Bolt config I think is not strictly necessary. We read your SSH config, so literally this file. Okay, no secrets in there. I should have thought about that before opening it. So if you can already SSH basically into any of your machines, all of that config can be passed on the command line as well, or read from your just SSH config. So I guess these are nice things that I've added to demonstrate and abstract, but I don't think either really you can install bolts and literally just run, like I said, this on a node that you have access to, and it'll just work.
Cool.
Yeah. Boop, boop. So what I'm going to be running is what we have. It's called a Canary Plan, and this is a plan that ships with Bolt. So let me actually in Bolt open this real quick. Plans init.pp. This is documentation for the plan itself, and so this is a Canary Plan. It's written in that Puppets or the plan scripting language that I was talking about. And so what I'm doing is first just defining some parameters. I can give them types. So like most of these are optional. What the Canary Plan does is it takes either a task, command, or script that I want to run, and then a set of nodes, and it runs whatever I want on a canary set of nodes, so a handful. And if it succeeds on all of those, then it will run on the rest of the nodes. And the reason that I want to show you this is because it has some of that really nice scripting capability that structured data doesn't always have. Like for this first one, what we want to be doing is making sure that we got at least one of task, command, or script, but not more than one of. And so here we have if any of these parameters has a value, then increment accumulator by 1, otherwise don't. And then we can check that the accumulator is exactly 1, or even better, we can say if it's not 1, then we can fail the plan in these specific ways. So that gives us a little bit more like graceful error handling.
Can we modify this plan? So like would that cause, well, not we don't do it live, but like for example, let's say my validation's a little more specific than that. Like is there ways to kind of add like additional blocks or whatever to the validation? Or would that fail?
Can you describe a little more? I guess 2 questions. Are you talking about for the Canary Plan specifically, or for like a theoretical, like if you were writing a plan?
Well, I'm not sure where this would fit in. So like, let's say I'm just going to make up a situation, and if this makes sense or it doesn't make sense, let me know. Let's say I wanted to install, I don't know, a web server or Nginx using Bolt to do that. Let's say that Nginx did not come up on one of the nodes. Like, can I say, look for a specific health check or invalidation, or is that a little bit out of scope for what can be done here?
Yeah, totally. So I guess there's a couple of ways that you could go about that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this if statement can be kind of whatever. And in fact, what you could do is you could run a command, or let's say like health check equals run command. And let's see what would be a good, like just Nginx.
Or maybe the public IP. Yeah, or something like that, right? Like, can I get like a home.html or some jazz? But that makes sense too. Yeah.
And then you want to make sure that you pass catch errors. Is true? I think true. And so that will make sure that if you run, so usually run command, if it errors and you don't have catch errors, it will just fail the whole plan. So those catch errors will make sure that it doesn't, and then it'll return any errors to health check. And then you could have something like health. So this health check is a result object in Bolt. And I think you can do, I would have to look it up, but it's like error or like errored nodes or something. Here, I actually kind of want to know.
To the docs.
Yeah. I don't know if you all can even see my screen.
No, I can't see the docs. So.
Oh, okay, cool. That's annoying, but fine.
So if there's like a presence of like an error object or something, like that means there's an error, or that's my guess, right? So.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think I don't remember exactly how we detect that it's an error. Error set is the magic phrase. So this would be error set. And so you could do like run command, like whatever you would want to do to try to like restart Nginx, like some service.
So for remediation,
Yeah, you could do remediation. You could do like just print like Nginx failed on these nodes. Kind of whatever error handling you want. You could even, so you'll get an error object and you can check the type of that error. And so if it's a certain type of error, like if it's like, oh, this file isn't here or something, you're like, I don't care about that. Like you can keep going. But if it's not that, then actually fail. And actually, since we're talking about this, we have an example, I think kind of down here, of like failing a plan.
Oh, there's one.
If something goes wrong. So, yeah.
Cool.
Here's an interesting question for you. When I was first working with Ansible, one of the biggest problems that I had, and this is just because I was incredibly new to it, I still am incredibly new to it, but one of the biggest problems I had was getting a node, a command to run on a node when the command required heightened privileges like sudo. How does Bolt deal with that?
Yeah, so pretty similar actually, I think, to Ansible, but you'll notice
run as, okay.
Run as, and then I don't need a password for the ones I'm connecting to, but we also accept a pseudo password.
Oh, okay.
And we use that to escalate privileges. There are some we just added support for plugins and are soon adding it for the config file as well. But so you could also define your config here and then make it a plugin. So if you didn't, like if your pseudo password is in Vault, then we have like a Vault plugin. So you just do Vault and then it's like, I forget, like field, password, wherever your
you just need to be injected or something. So
password is. Yeah. And then you configure connecting to Vault here. You can do it over HTTPS. We have like a CA cert, field, etc.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's kind of how escalating works in Bolt. I'm trying to think if there's any other like nuances. I don't think so. But yeah. Okay, so kind of back to the demo. So what I'm going to be doing is using the Canary Plan to run this kind of toy task that I have. So it's just in Python, and it's pretty simple. It just takes a message over standard in, and then prints it, basically. This is literally something we use for testing. And
that's what we're seeing right there is the entire plan.
Yep. Well, so I guess I should talk a little bit about tasks and what they are. So tasks are basically scripts that can have metadata. And that metadata makes it a lot easier to share the task with other people. So if you go to the Forge, then there's lots of tasks that people have written there that they've shared with people. And so the metadata just gives you things like you can add a description, you can list out your parameters. So like if I do bolt task show, it'll list all of the tasks I have. I'll try this like bolt task show. I think this one has some pretty good documentation. Yeah, so the Puppet agent install test installs the Puppet agent, and so like this description is from the metadata, and you can like list all of your parameters. You can have tasks that are written in 2 languages, and then a way to decide like which one to use. So you can say like if this node has Windows installed, then like use the PowerShell version. Otherwise, use the shell version, which I think we actually do for this one. Agent tasks. So if I open up this install.json, I have my description and my list of parameters. And then at the bottom, I have my implementations key, which is what, like I said, will let you. So I have install shell, which we use for shell, or install PowerShell, which requires the PowerShell. We call it a feature. And that is literally just like if PowerShell is installed, then use PowerShell.
Okay. These would execute as soon as I connect to the machine, or is there like another command? So this is, from my understanding, this is basically the plan to say, okay, when it connects to some sort of Windows machine, does it have PowerShell, or am I on or off?
Even the task itself, you don't have to run it through a plan. You can run the task standalone, and it'll know if PowerShell is available or not.
Gotcha.
Before like copying over the right executable. So I could do like just bolt task run puppet agent install. And I actually think this is going to fail because this is what was not working previously. This is the I'm not really sure.
That's a good chicken or the egg argument. I mean, just fictitiously, like if I was a Puppet customer and I needed a good way to like get Puppet agents on machines, I could just do this, right? So.
Oh, maybe it is going to work. Oh my gosh.
Stuff. It's transferring stuff. Like.
Maybe I should try my old demo. Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, and actually that's a pretty big use case for like getting people started with Puppet. We use this task a lot. Because like deploying your Puppet infrastructure is kind of a bear. And so being able to do it all remotely from one machine instead of having to like go into each one. Wow. All right. Cool. Glad it works now. I guess I was just having network issues.
It knew we were watching. So
seriously. I know. Now I'm a little tempted to try my old demo, but I don't think it will work. So I guess I'll try this one first, and then maybe we'll see if the other one works. So for this demo, I admittedly forgot to write some metadata for my task, but that's kind of the idea of a task, and it's like I said, literally just a script in any language you want. So I'm going to be using the Canary Plan to run my script on my nodes from Terraform, and I guess one last thing is I have my parameters defined in JSON just because I didn't want to be passing in like JSON hashes over the command line. But usually you can pass your parameters in on the command line, especially if they're simple parameters like this one. So, no. Boot params at params.json -n all. Okay, and hopefully that works. Fingers crossed. Okay.
Green is good.
Yay. Okay. There we go. So we successfully defined a message to be printed in our task.
Nice.
Now, all of this is like kind of impractical, I realize. And so from here, let me show you some of the Forge infrastructure that we use. So you can see we have like some Terraform files that define some of our, Terraform stuff, wave sands. I don't really know how the actual Forge team uses that so much, but they have a couple of nice plans that they use to actually migrate their database. Let me pull up their documentation to see which one. So the first thing they run is this RDS setup plan. And it looks like that takes like a stage and a database host and actually deploys RDS. So I guess a couple of things happening. Let's see, I'm not sure how into the weeds I should get with this. One thing to note that is kind of nice about Bolt plans is that you can apply Puppet code in them directly. So you can pass in a block of Puppet code, including applying modules that other people have written. So Bolt is, in terms of the conversation of like Bolt versus Ansible and Bolt like in cloud, that gets a little more interesting, I guess. But if you're using Puppet and you want to have like ad hoc task runner, essentially, like Bolt is a pretty obvious choice. Like it's very, Bolt connects really well and works really well with Puppet.
Even back to the point for the Forge team, even running like remote Terraform can be, you have to figure out a way or pay Hashi for that. So it's interesting that very good example that you could use Bolt to execute that. So I see pretty good use cases for that kind of union. There's some sort of task runner and some sort of infrastructure as code at the same time.
Definitely. And basically just using Bolt here as like a provisioner, I think, for doing that like RDS setup on the infrastructure you bring up with Terraform, which is a really common workflow that we see our users use. Boop. And then they have this migrate DB host plan, which I think is what actually like moves the like database host from one host to the other. Yeah.
This is the one they don't want you to execute.
Yeah.
Do not run.
I know. In hindsight, I should maybe have like familiarized myself more so I can like show a little bit more.
Yeah, hopefully no secrets are in here. We edited it out.
No, I did check that I could show this to everyone. So I know there's nothing secret, although it is a private repo, unfortunately, so I can't encourage people to go check it out. But yeah, I don't know. Does that seem like an okay stopping place? Or
yeah, I think you've really showed or demonstrated what Bolt can do, and I was unclear of what it was, and now I'm not so unclear. So for users that are companies or whoever, developers who are interested in Bolt, where would be the first place they should turn?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's called bolt.guide. And it is our like getting started tutorial. And so that'll be a really hands-on, take you through all of the concepts. And honestly, Bolt is pretty simple. Like I would say that the entire hands-on lab probably takes you like 2 hours maximum. And like I said, it's really as easy as like Bolt command run whatever you want on all of your nodes. So, whoa.
We got a nice failure.
Not sure, I didn't even know that was going to run on anything because I didn't think there was nodes in here.
Someone's going to get some Slack messages in a little bit.
Yeah, someone tried to run.
All in the name of the new stack. Hey, it's good.
Yeah.
So tell me this. For someone that is interested in Node, what kind of knowledge would they need to have before they dive into this? What would be best to understand?
I think as long as you understand like how to SSH into something, even that, like you don't need to know how SSH works. So like if you can SSH into another host, then I think Bolt's for you.
That's pretty basic.
Yeah. We're really trying to make it easy to get started with. I feel like there's so many tools, Puppet included, where you need to like do a whole class to like get started with it. And so really trying to lower the barrier.
Right. One of the things I find with a lot of these tools, these orchestration tools, is that you can spend a couple of hours to get ramped up to do a very, very basic, simple task. But beyond that, all of a sudden, the learning curve becomes very steep.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the same case with Bolt? I mean, you're gonna be able to get in there pretty quickly and do some fairly simple things, and then all of a sudden you're going to face a pretty steep learning curve to do something a little more complex?
I think it depends on what you're trying to do and what you already know. So, YAML, I would say, is like pretty industry standard, and that's what our orchestration language, that's one of the orchestration languages we support. And so with that, I really don't think it would take, like, if you know YAML, it'd be pretty easy to orchestrate something. And that's really as complex as Bolt gets. Like the plans that I showed you are like maximum complexity, I think, of Bolt. Since you can write scripts and tasks in any language, I think that's also pretty, like, you can kind of start where you are and just learn what you need to do what you need to do. I'm not going to say that like, oh, like system administration will be so easy a caveman can do it with Bolt. You do still need to. I think the complexity though there is going to come from like the tasks that you're handed, and not hopefully from using Bolt.
Okay. So what was that URL that users could go to learn more?
Bolt.guide.
Okay, and then after that, where should they go?
So our official docs are, I think, pup.pt/Bolt. Will get you there, or at least that gets you to our like kind of Bolt landing page. From there, you can find like our documentation and how to install Bolt, etc.
Okay. Ravi, do you have anything else to add?
No, that was it. Great demo, Lucy. I learned a lot. It actually made it really clear. I was even struggling before our conversation today about differences between the main Puppet packages and Bolt. So it makes really good sense. And I think the community at large will benefit from seeing this. So good job. Great job.
Yay. Oh my gosh. It makes me so happy. Good.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for coming to the New Stack Makers to view this video. There will be more to come. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.